Okay, let's assume that this is actually working. I'm doing this for the first time. Welcome to Anthro is Fun, Part 3. Now, this is quite a long class, so I'm breaking this up into more easily digestible portions. This is class number 3 in a 7-class series, class 3, part 1. Okay? And in this class, we're going to talk about Homo erectus's progeny. So that would be our species, Homo sapiens, the Neandertals, the Davidovi people who anthropologists aren't quite sure if it's a separate species or it's a subspecies of either Neanderthals or modern humans. And a very tiny amount on Homo florensis, the hobbits, that little species on the Flores Island. My name is Victoria Leo, and I am teaching anthropology. I have taught at the college level for, credit. This is a non-credit, let's just have fun with anthropology. The class is called Anthropology. Anthro is Fun. And it's an introduction to Anthro for interested adult learners. I'm teaching it at the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, OLLI, at Southern Oregon University in Ashland and Medford in Southern Oregon. So, welcome, and here's our outline for the entire class, all right? I'm going to review some basic biology, the biology of speciation, because we can't really talk about, how one species evolves from another without talking about how that happens. Talking about tools and technology through the ages, that is going to be the second class in this series. Erectus's children, the Neandertals, Davidovi, and sapiens, a lot of fun theories about what's so special about us, because of course we're here and these other species are not. So why did that happen? Migrations. As you recall, Homo erectus was the first species of hominin, meaning members of the specifically human lineage. Hominid, with an ID, hominid at the end, is humans and all of our ancestors, plus the African apes, which is gorillas, chimps, bonobos, and all of their ancestors back at least 20 million years. So that whole lineage, we are a form of ape. We're so similar to our cousins biochemically and otherwise. The only thing that makes an ancestor a hominin and not just a hominid is bipedalism. That's what makes our lineage unique. At least 7 million years ago, probably much earlier than that, probably more like 9 million, we had fully bipedal ancestors at 7 million years ago. For reasons that are speculated, and there's some evidence, but it's by no means clear, 100% clear, why there was a selective advantage for being habitually bipedal, standing up, 2 hands free, means we're slower than a 4-footed animal, but there must have been some advantage, possibly because we were in a forested area. Maybe it was easier to habitually, pick fruit and things off trees, right? Ideas about, if we're habitually upright, we can see further, but in a forest, how far can you see? 6 feet, if you're lucky. So I don't know about that, but there may, and again, there's probably more about the environment and so forth than we currently know. Anyway, what's so special about us goes beyond the fact that we're bipedal, because by the time you get to Homo sapiens, we've got a large-brained ancestor. Homo erectus had quite a large brain, and we had tools, and we had fire, and we had all kinds of things. So this is not a trivial question. Anyway, migrations out of Africa, part 2, right? Because Homo erectus went first. When we speciated from Homo erectus in Africa, one point of origin in East Africa, and then spread out into the rest of Africa and crossed in rafts to Arabia, which was lush and wet and had lots of food. At that point, moved out. Neandertals actually left Africa. They speciated and left Africa before we speciated, but so it actually probably should be part 3. But Neanderthals aren't our ancestors, so that was my rationale for part 2. So when our ancestors left Africa, there were 2 near extinction events caused by volcanoes at 120,000 years ago and 60,000 years ago. 60,000 years ago, the entire human species was wiped out except for that would have been tough, 2,000 unique genomes, again, in East and South Africa. So the human species has a very low level of biological diversity. I've got blonde hair and other people have curly dark hair. Our faces have some color and blah, blah, blah differences. All that stuff is very, very trivial. Obviously not culturally trivial, but biologically incredibly trivial, and not related to survival value in the wild. Of course, affluent people of any hair and skin color in the modern world are going to do much, much better. They're going to have healthier children, healthier grandchildren. They're going to have wealth. They're going to have wealth. Wealth brings you power and good health and longevity. Okay, so in the modern world, these trivial differences are made to make a difference. However, in the 3rd class, we're going to talk about all these issues of modern human biology, including disease resistance and how the amounts of Neanderthal admixture and Davidovi admixture differ different parts of the world, and what the impact is on modern health. And we're going to be talking about what you can actually learn from things like 23andMe, all these genetic testing, finding out what your quote ancestry is. It's a lot of fun. But what does it actually mean? Okay, and then the rest of the migrations to Australia, America, Oceania, the Pacific Islands, how agriculture developed. Arguably, the greatest disaster that ever befell the human species. Because agriculture is the beginning of runaway human population growth. Also, that is the beginning of inequality in the human experience. The suppression of 90 to 95% of the population by a small elite, the suppression of women, the development of brutal empires, slavery, the legacy of which we're still living. We still have very unequal societies. Not everywhere. The Nordic countries are a sharp contrast, but if you're an American or you're British or you're Chinese or you're Indian, which is most of the human population, you're dealing with very high levels of inequality. Shifting causes of death. Instead of being killed by predators, were being felled by diseases. And some insight into the whole CSI thing, blood types, ongoing natural selection. That is the third class, okay? So before we get going, review of Anthro level 2. We speciated from Homo erectus. So let's talk about what was so special about Homo erectus, Homo ergaster. Now, one thing to keep in mind, anthropologists and paleontologists, you know, the people who determine who's a member of what species, come in two forms. There's the lumpers, who are of the opinion that there's a lot of biological diversity within a species, and so every little difference is not a species indicator to us. Okay, I'm a lumper, okay? Telling you ahead of time, I'm a lumper. I look at the level of diversity in modern mammal species, and it's huge. So when I look at a fossil, I don't immediately want to apply a new species name to it. Now, why do people do that? Why do they become splitters? We're human beings. These fossils are found by academics whose funding and career success rely on, spectacular new finds, new species. So if you say, oh, I found a new species, ooh, your career takes off. If you say, oh, I found another Homo erectus, everybody goes, yawn. Who cares? Okay, so being a splitter has career advantages. Now, I'm going to say not everybody has that crass motivation, at least not entirely, but it's there, and you need to understand that. Okay, so the reason I've got two different names there is that the splitters say Homo erectus is the name for this species in Asia. It's Homo ergaster in Africa and Europe. I think that's the way they split it. I don't care because I call them all Homo erectus. Okay, so that's me. What was so special about Homo erectus? 50% larger brain. Now, did the brain capacity increase and then it caused all these other things? Or did all these other things start happening and that provided a selective advantage for an increased brain size? Remember, there's some downsides to an increased brain size, one of which is that more women are going to die in childbirth. This does not get to be a significant factor probably until Homo sapiens. Okay, our chimpanzees, gorillas, our ancestors, the Australopithecines, and previous genera, no worries, just pop the baby out, because small baby, big pelvis. The minute you become bipedal, the baby has to pass through your hip bones, and the hip bones have to become bowl-shaped because it's holding up the entire body. Okay, instead of it being, you know, on a horizontal plane and then the baby just pops out the hind end, you've got this big old pelvis. Even our ancestors who were bipedal had little babies, small brains. Okay. And they could just pass on through, no worries. Women didn't die in childbirth until Homo sapiens, probably. But you're halfway between super easy and super hard at Homo erectus. So, you know, this is a cost. If you're losing your most important members of the species, which, sorry guys, it's the women, because the number of women determines your ability to create the next generation. You can have a smaller number of males. You have less diversity, less biological diversity, but women are more crucial. Okay, anyway, so the other thing with having a larger brain is that your required caloric intake every day goes up. Neurons are incredible glucose guzzlers, energy guzzlers. Okay, so what you're doing is you're getting this really expensive component, so it had better be crucial for your survival. If it's not crucial for your survival, you're just wasting. And this arguably could be part of the reason why we outcompeted the Neanderthals, because we could get by on less food because we had bodies that were less thirsty. Okay, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here, but just kind of giving you, this is not trivial. The caloric cost of a bigger brain. So there needed to be a really powerful selective force. We were doing something with these bigger brains that meant something big, all right? So Homo erectus tamed fire. This is huge. You'll remember from Anthro 2 and Anthro 1, for all the ages of hominin evolution, so from 7 million to 2 million years ago, 1.5 million years ago, all right, our ancestors slept, if we could sleep, in trees to avoid some predators, and we were sitting ducks for leopards who can climb trees. And the battle was, could we avoid getting into patterns as to where we were sleeping to outsmart the big cats. And based on some good info, there was probably a 20% predation rate every year. That meant 1 in 5 members of your group died every year. That is a huge, heavy loss rate. Okay, children, elders, people in the prime of life, producers in the prime of life. Okay, 20%, because we had no protection except getting lucky and outsmarting the cats. Getting a stick and trying to beat them off, that's all we had. And I'm sure it worked some percentage of the time. But that cat was hungry, and that cat was relentless. And if it kept it up for hours and hours and hours, and it didn't leave in the morning, eventually the cat was going to get lucky with somebody, or somebody was going to fall out of the tree, from slipping as they were trying to escape. So the bet was really on the cat until Homo erectus. When we had fire, we could have 2 members of the group, and we're talking 20 to 40 people who are all related to each other, extended family group, cousins and in-laws, either the women stayed put and they imported husbands, or the men stayed put and they imported wives, but everybody was related to, related to each other. This was an extended family group. Everybody would sleep close to the fire, and 2 people would stay up, in shifts, tending the fire all night long to keep us safe. And for the first time in human history, our ancestors could sleep through the night in relative safety. This was huge. They could also cook their food, which meant greater nutrition. Now, I know that there's a raw food movement right now, blah, blah, blah. And if you're trying to lose weight, raw food is great because you're eating all this food and you're getting very little, you're getting just a small amount of the nutrition that you're actually consuming. which is great if you're trying to lose weight, because you feel full, but you're not actually absorbing that much in the way of calories. Okay, our ancestors were not interested in starving. Time that you spent searching for food was time when you were out vulnerable to predators. All right. And most of your ancestors starved to death. The only reason you're here today is because if they starved to death, somebody else took care of their children, or they starved to death after they had at least one child who that grew up to the point where they could take care of themselves and survived. Okay, but most of your ancestors starved to death. And so wasting food was not an option. When you could cook food, roast your veggies, occasionally scavenged meat, you had a tremendous advantage because your body could absorb more calories, more nutrition. Babies could have the milk supplemented. Young children got better nutrition. It was mostly children who starved to death, and elders. The elders who were losing their teeth, and we're talking, an elder was somebody who was 40, okay? Elders would get better nutrition, and it was important to our ancestors to have elders because in the absence of an internet, if you have a drought and you need water, if you're going from water hole to water hole to water hole, you're all going to die before you get to the one that never dries up. If you've got an elder who remembers 25 years ago, there was a profound drought, or there was a 3 years in a row drought, and everything dried up except for this one well, and they remember where it is because they're old enough. They were 10 or 15, and kids in those days remembered things because it was a matter of life and death. Okay, so you had an elder who remembers and saves the group. There's a tremendous advantage to you in keeping grandma, grandpa alive and healthy. Okay, not just love and sentiment, but practical survival. The more elders you have, right? Also, elders, if you've got fire, you can have a home base, a safe place to leave some of the kids with the elders. Nursing babies had to stay with mom while she went out foraging with the group. But the older kids could stay closer to the home base, and the elders could do things in the local area, without not going too far, and stay safe, right, with the fire. The other thing that Homo erectus had, and we know that they did because the throat anatomy had evolved to the point where there was a larynx, not as sophisticated, not the full range of nuanced sound that Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis could do, but they probably had spoken language. Now, they might have had gestural language before that, but remember, language isn't just having hands to do things. Language is a brain that understands grammar, right? Not just nouns, the names for things, but verbs for action. When you've got language, you can analyze today and yesterday. You can plan tomorrow. You can do more sophisticated things. It really, really matters. Now, it's likely that the brain and the language capacity, the throat, were co-evolving because language depends on a brain that can handle language. Now, chimpanzees with 400 cc's and gorillas, with an equivalent level of brain, can learn American Sign Language, fully human language. However, it takes a long, long time for them to learn. Part of it is, they're they're a fully conscious and sentient species, and they don't care to. They're not dogs. They don't live to please us. It's more like your next door neighbor who might or might not do what you ask them to do. But part of it is they need a lot of time to grasp, some of them grasp concepts. So with 800 cc's, twice as big brain, Homo erectus could probably figure things out a lot faster than our modern cousins. Maybe, maybe not. Chimps in the wild are pretty darn smart. Anyway, a whole other subject. Okay, natural selection. I'm not going to review natural selection, except to say, remember that natural selection doesn't act at the level of a species. We can say Homo sapiens outcompeted the Neanderthals. What we really mean is individual human Homo sapiens had some advantage over individual Neanderthals. And the concept of kin selection explains altruism in the human genome and altruism in the Neanderthal genome, although, of course, we don't have data on that. But what it says is, if I confront a predator or I throw myself into the river to rescue someone who's related to me, right, to the extent that I help my group, I am helping my DNA to survive, because my siblings are 50% related to me. My cousins are anywhere from, 10% to 25% related to me. And, and if I take 25% related to me and I multiply it by 10, there's a lot of DNA that I'm saving and protecting. I'm vastly simplifying something that I would spend 10 minutes on in person. But anyway, let's just very quickly talk about, to remind you that Australopithecines did not have spoken language. Homo erectus did, the Neanderthals did, and we just discussed why language is so crucial. Okay, now, what does the word human mean? All right. Human means Homo sapiens, our species. Our family is hominids, okay? The orangs, gorillas, chimps, and us. Hominins, hominini, is the African apes and us. And hominini, also known as hominins, is our tribe here, right? But our lineage, our clade, okay? Genus name Homo, which just means human. Actually, in Latin, never mind, forget about Latin. Species name is sapiens. Now, from 200,000 years ago to 100,000 years ago, the first subspecies of human was Idaltu. It means the old ones in one of the African languages. I can't remember, probably something in Ethiopia. And then Homo sapiens sapiens, our most recent subspecies from 100,000 years ago to the present, right? Race doesn't have a biological meaning, right? In plants, a race is a subspecies, not in animals, right? Race is a cultural term. Now, I know you're going to look at somebody, somebody who's from Kenya, and then look at me or, someone else who's European and say, oh, no, they're so biologically different. No, we're not. From a genetic, biological perspective, all of humanity is one race. And that is Homo sapiens sapiens. Okay. The American Anthropological Association website will discuss this for you in lots of detail, and you can also give me a call or email. Just a reminder, my email is victoria@soaringdragon.biz. Soaring, 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 dragon.biz, or Z if you're outside the US. Okay, it's business, right? Okay, victoria@soaringdragon.biz. My phone number is on the soaringdragon.biz website, so all the contact information is there. Lots of available information on my Facebook group, which is Healing Minds, Healing Bodies. I've got a blog. The name is soaringdragoninjapan.blogspot.com. And in addition to this YouTube channel for anthropology, I also have another YouTube channel for all kinds of cool stuff. And as I go through this class, I'm going to be saying, go to the other YouTube channel for information on the paleo diet and health and wellness and becoming successful in business and all the things that I do for entrepreneurs and for people who have illnesses, physical illnesses, and people who have psychological blockages. It's like I want to lose weight, and I'm trying to do these things. It's like, why is it not happening? There's a block, a subconscious block. I can blast them away, and then what you intend happens because the blockage is gone. Okay. Anyway, I think that's as much information as you need. Okay, let's move on. Oh, I'm sorry. The name of the other YouTube channel is Human Bio numeral 4, the number 4, everyone. So Human Bio for everyone. And it's the number 4, okay? Human Bio for everyone. All right. So we've got 2 species that I'm going to be talking about in this class, the Neandertals and Homo sapiens. Now look at those dates. 600,000 years ago. Some scientists are saying, oh, I don't like that earlier date. It's probably more like 500 or 450,000 years ago. Still, one heck of a long time. The biggest brain, the first people, if I can use that term, on Earth with a big brain and an almost human biology and thinking pattern on this planet was not us, was not our ancestors. It was Homo neanderthalensis. Okay, 600,000 years ago, possibly 450, right? And their biology was, they speciated from Homo erectus in Africa. And remember, speciation tends to occur when a subgroup is cut off from the rest of the species, frequently by a physical barrier, a mountain range, a big river, you know, the Red Sea. So they're marrying amongst themselves. You've got founder's effect, which is the fact that that small group is not going to have all the biological diversity of the parent group. So they're going to be marrying amongst themselves. So you're going to have mutation, and you're going to have recombination of what's there. And those two groups, the isolated group and the main group, are going to start to diverge. And you may have different selective forces working on them. One on the other side of the big river or whatever, at a mountain range, you've got very dry conditions. People, or whatever the species is, start eating different foods. There's strong selective pressure on the teeth and the jaws and the musculature of the head, or there's some really nice raw materials. They start using start creating new kinds of tools. They become more successful at doing something, hunting bunny rabbits, compared to the folks back home. So you're going to have, that's how speciation occurs. Generally through isolation of a small group. Okay, so you're not mixing with all the variety and the diversity back home. You've got natural selection working on a smaller group of you. Okay, so in looking at this, when Neanderthals left Africa and moved into the Middle East, went up through the Suez Red Sea area, or crossed to Arabia on rafts to get into the Middle East, and then headed out into Asia, headed into Southern Europe. Southern Europe is as far as they could go at this point in time, because ice sheets were covering Europe and northern Asia. All right, and so there was they were held back by geography, and the ice sheets melted and advanced and melted and advanced for hundreds of thousands of years, and the Neanderthals evolved, and they became a hominin with very barrel-chested. They were built like a refrigerator, very strong, lots of muscle, and this was their great advantage for a very long time. They were stronger, when they started hunting in various animals, including the megafauna, which is just a fancy Latin, I think it's Latin, either that or Greek, way of saying big animals, the huge mammoths and big megatheriums and blah blah blah. I don't remember which species were running around, but big critters. They had spears, and they had spear throwers. We're going to talk about technology in the second class. But anyway, they had huge muscular strength to do this. And they had some very interesting, as we've been able to start doing genetic analysis, some very interesting things. Red hair. Some of the Neanderthals had red hair. Now, fun fact, their red hair was not the same gene that makes red hair in Homo sapiens. It was an independent mutation. It was a gene in a different location. it produced a different protein to make the red hair. Okay, they may have had blue eyes. They certainly had light eyes. And we know blue eyes was a mutation that arose in Homo sapiens relatively recently, only about 10,000 years ago, 9,000 years ago. So, and then the second class, we're going to be talking about toolkits, but just to understand that the Neanderthals tended towards bigger, heavier stone tools because they were stronger and they could use a lot of muscle, sheer muscle power to do things. Our ancestors, smaller, lighter, less muscled, and so less able to use just sheer muscle power for things. Which might have encouraged us to be more clever instead of just using strength. The jury is not out on that. And speaking of hunting in the human species, we only went after the megafauna for a very, very short period of time in history compared to the whole panoply of human history. Even using the word human to mean Homo sapiens, so only 200,000 years, which is, is ignoring the Homo erectus, etc. Even if we just stick with Homo sapiens, right, 200,000 years, only a very, very small percentage of time were we hunting. Most of the time, we were scavenging. And archaeologists will tell you most of the bones found in human trash dumps were bunny rabbits. Now, bunny rabbits are not hunted by mighty hunters. Bunny rabbits are snared by women. and men, in some cultures. I'm not saying that catching bunny rabbits is unmanly. I'm just saying that, mighty hunter was not going on. Okay, that was a very, very recent, and it only happened for a short period of time when all the good animals were killed. Our ancestors focused on intensive foraging of what could be picked up, or knocked over relatively easy, collecting duck eggs for protein, catching ducks with bolos, stuff like that, and trapping bunny rabbits. Our ancestors were not stupid. They were not going to go after, something big with horns. Not going to go after a bison. If you can eat bunny rabbits, our ancestors were not stupid. Bunny stew every third day. Hey, no problem, man. I'm not gonna get myself killed trying to go after a bison if I can get a bunny rabbit. Okay. Yeah, and let me talk about those two near extinction events. 120,000 years ago, approximately, a supervolcano exploded in Indonesia, and there was some subsidiary action in India, which set off some volcanoes in India, or maybe it went the other way around. I can't remember. Anyway, big explosion of volcanic activity, which killed most of the Homo erectus and Homo sapiens and Neandertals and Davidovi, who were near, in Asia. And it had an impact as far away as Africa. The Europeans were mostly okay, but what it did was, it put a pall into the air. A lot of crop failures. It was a worldwide phenomenon. A lot of species, I mean, all the mammal and bird species were affected. Okay, we almost got wiped out. And what saved us was living by the sea, and there was a really nice archaeological site in South Africa by the side of the ocean. And so it was really clear that those folks were, because plants weren't growing very well, they were eating clams and netting, using nets to pull in fish and so forth, and eating seaweed. Very, very good for you, as you know, if you hang out in health food stores. And again, another near extinction event, even more devastating, at 60,000 years ago. We ended up with 2,000 unique genomes based on genetic information. The geneticists can look at the number of mutations and blah, 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 blah. Okay. So we had about 2,000 unique individuals, unique genomes. So we probably had, 5 or 10,000 scattered throughout East and South Africa. That's not a lot of genetic diversity. And that is why the modern human species, which is the descendants of that very small number of people, has such a low level of genetic diversity today. My African-American brothers liked to try to get me wound up by saying things like, oh, you white folks look alike. And I was like, yeah, of course we do. 60,000 years ago, a volcano exploded, and and by the way, all black folks look alike too, because it's all the same human species. So that's why we've got such a low level of biological diversity in the human species today, because 60,000 years is not a long time for us to accumulate enough mutations to have a really physically robust species. Now, you can go to Human Bio for Everyone, my other YouTube channel, to get information on, the paleo diet and what our ancestors actually ate and, stuff like that. Lots of cool information there. And does anybody know what that flag is doing there? Yes, the gentleman on the left-hand side there. Yes, it's the flag of Ethiopia. Because that's where we think our ancestors, most of them, hold up. Okay, now here are the Neanderthals. A redhead with blue eyes, and that map, and a couple of faces, one young woman and two gents. Why they always show them with these big old teeth is beyond me. The teeth were not significantly larger than Homo sapiens teeth. But anyway, big noses, bigger brow ridges. Some of them, that woman doesn't have big brow ridges. Okay, she looks indistinguishable from a Homo sapiens. So there was biological diversity among the Neanderthals, just like there is in humans. Some folks are built like a tank, and some folks are thin, thin and built like a reed. Mesomorphs and ectomorphs. The map of Neanderthal spread is talking about a time when the ice sheets had retreated quite a bit, so more of Europe is accessible, and it also shortchanges the newest information. The Neanderthals did spread into South Asia. okay, because the Davidovi people may have been, probably were, an offshoot, maybe not a separate species, maybe just a subspecies. Homo neanderthalensis davidovi, compared with Homo neanderthalensis classico, classic Neanderthals. I'm making this stuff up. So, bear that in mind. The map is a bit off. Okay, so many anthropologists are looking at what makes us human, right? How are we unique? And when people say something is unique, they're frequently, the subtext is why we're superior. And when we're talking about humans, this is definitely the subtext. Sometimes people will come right out and say, why are we superior? Sometimes they hide behind the word unique, all right? But so when you see some of these theories, try not to groan too loudly. Okay, so what makes us unique as Homo sapiens? One of the oldest theories, now pretty much abandoned, is that we were smarter than the Neanderthals. Okay, now, actually, I am going to stop and go back here and talk a bit more about the Neanderthals, all right? You can see the Middle East in this map, right? Now, at approximately 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens was moving out of Africa. We had started to recover our numbers a bit from that decimation of the 60,000 years ago. So 50,000 years ago, we've got the first signs of Homo sapiens in the Middle East. And we sat there for 20,000 years. Couldn't really go much further. Some archaeological evidence, maybe it was only 10,000 years. But still, that is a long time for a supposedly superior species, which means that the Neanderthals had that real estate and they were exploiting the resources very, very efficiently, and they were making it clear that this was their turf, stay off. Okay, this is the time frame when some humans and Neanderthals acquired each other as mates. And it's the Neanderthals who joined human groups who contributed some Neanderthal genes to the future human genome. Okay, I think you're aware that people of the Middle East and to some extent Northern India, Central Asia, and Europeans have between 1% and 5% Neanderthal genes. Okay, so and remember, there weren't a whole lot of humans in the world. So if there was some Neanderthal admixture, that would be copied through all the generations and so forth as the numbers increased. At approximately 40,000 years ago, we something happened that was a bit more decisive, and Homo sapiens started moving into and taking over the Neanderthal home range. Archaeologically speaking, we've discovered that a lot of the Neanderthal fossils that we found died of starvation. Some of them were killed by Homo sapiens, We found some, I was going to say smoking gun, but it was more like smoking arrowhead. This wasn't a friendly competition. And you know, so it looks like it was mostly resource competition. Now, what could possibly have made us competitive with these built like a tank, stronger than us, in place, doing really well until we started coming along? People. And one of the theories that has the strongest evidence, both logically and archaeologically, is that because we were smaller, we could get by on 2,000 calories a day. They needed at least 3,500, the smaller females, and up to 5,000 for the bigger individuals. Another thing that caused trouble for the Neanderthals is they were focusing a little too heavily on hunting big game. There's archaeological evidence that the females and teenagers of both genders, both sexes, I should say, were out there hunting. Now, you don't want, especially if your population is under pressure, you don't want to lose your breeders. Okay, I'm not saying women shouldn't have any fun. What I'm saying is you don't want to lose a woman in a hunting accident. Males are more expendable. Okay, females are what keep the population going. They are better. You're better off having them engaging in acquiring the majority of the calories and the protein that the group needs through foraging rather than hunting big game and getting killed. Okay, because that is not good in terms of, you know, population survival, you know, species survival. You don't want the women getting killed. And you're going to see one of the theories is that because Homo sapiens had specialists, the folks of whatever sex who were good, and generally not the women, because again, you don't want to lose them. The folks who were good at big game hunting went big game hunting. The folks who were clever at snaring bunnies snared bunnies. The plant specialists, you know, knew exactly where to go and as efficiently as possible, and they had string bags, you know, and there were possible other, so that was a cultural thing, right? More specializing in jobs, you know, food acquiring jobs, and then of course everybody brings the food back at the end of the day and it gets shared out with everybody. Okay, the food sharing in Homo sapiens may or may not have been unique. If you've got a group that shares food, it's been mathematically demonstrated, everybody gets better nutrition and the whole group / species survives better than if you hoard food in, you know, small family groups, and you're not sharing with everybody. Okay, so more of this group consciousness possibly, and food acquiring specializations, you're likely to get better at it. It looks like the Homo sapiens toolkit was a little bit more sophisticated, although Neanderthals could have gotten Homo sapiens tools and been using, and sometimes it's not clear that this is one archaeological level or two that got mixed up. There's a lot of ways to argue, and anthropologists do, about results. So that may not have been happening. The other thing that may have been an advantage or a disadvantage is that it's possible, according to some data, that the Neanderthals matured more quickly. Now, you might think this is an advantage. If you get to full physical maturity at 9 years, you know your population can grow more quickly compared to one that needs to be 15. Excuse me. And excuse me, in indigenous communities that are not excuse me, super well nourished, which would be most of our ancestors most of the time, you don't get menstrual cycles starting, you don't get puberty hitting until age 15 in Homo sapiens. So that's an extra 6 years. The alternative view on that is the longer childhood lasts, the longer the youth have an opportunity to learn more before they have to go out and perform, okay? Goodness gracious, allergies, I'm talking too much. Okay, so so that's just a little bit more background on our lovely cousins, the Neanderthals. Okay, so what makes us human and not Neanderthal? We're smarter. We did not have bigger brains. The Neanderthals were bigger individuals, so they had slightly larger brains, but the so-called encephalization quotient was the same. Okay, they were just as smart as we were based on brain capacity. Now, one of the things that does not fossilize is neuron connections. When the neurons die, they die. Goodness gracious. It's possible that we had denser or more efficient neural connections. So although our brains weren't any bigger, we could think cleverer or more innovative thoughts. Now, obviously, that's a very attractive theory for a species that wants to think that they're clever and innovative. Okay, the second one, and I swear I'm not making any of this up, is that we had an advantage in this competition with the Neanderthals because we have artistic sensibility. I'm not laughing, not laughing. Because the cave paintings, right? Beautiful, exquisite. It indicates thinking, consciousness, a possible a theory of mind. Humans trying to understand their prey at a deeper level. Humans possibly having religious / spiritual, atomism would be the technical term, religious sensibility. So humans survived because we got religion. Not laughing, not laughing. And the Neanderthals did not. Okay. One of the things that Americans are fighting a battle over at this point is 20 years ago, in an attempt to save money and raise children's test scores on essential skills of English language, mathematics, basic science concepts. They started cutting art and music, all these, and you know, physical movement, you know, gym class. out of the curriculum. Okay, focus on the essentials. And art and music are never considered essential in American culture. It would be interesting to see how the people who want to cut arts and music from the curriculum would respond to the proposition that the only reason that we're all alive today and the Neanderthals didn't inherit the earth is because we had art and they didn't. So why are we depriving our children of what makes us human? However, problem with this theory is that there have been some Neanderthal caves that seem to have art, and you can argue that the cave was taken over by Homo sapiens and they're the ones that did the art. It wasn't really the Neanderthals. You can hold on to this, we're the only people with artistic sensibility. Our brains are more sophisticated because we do art. Who knows? It's hard to see how artistic sensibility is going to put more food on the table, because this is what it comes down to. The Neanderthals starved to death. When the big animals were hunted to extinction, because they were being hunted by the Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, they were hunted to extinction. We know that our ancestors switched to smaller animals. The Neanderthals did also, but not as enthusiastically. They seem to have continued to try to, go after the big animals. Some theorists believe that they weren't as flexible in dealing with disaster, and maybe their brains were just naturally conservative. And I'm not going to make any political comments at this point. Definitely not. But if the Neanderthals had a naturally conservative bent, they didn't want to change how they did things. They could have, hunted the animals to extinction and then starved. If they weren't flexible thinkers, it's hard to imagine somebody with, 1,200 cc's not being able to be flexible in their thinking. But there are Homo sapiens who are incredibly stubborn and incredibly conservative and refuse to change the way they do things. So it's possible that the Neanderthals died out because they stubborned themselves and they conservatived themselves into a grave. Some theorists have said that too many women died hunting, going after these big dangerous animals, and they didn't have enough female people churning out babies. Because remember, the Neanderthals would have died in childbirth at the same rate that humans do, because they got the same issue with the pelvis. Okay, big brains trying to get through a tiny pelvis. Okay, so women were dying in childbirth, and they were dying from gigantic rhinoceros horns, and they could have just succumbed to that problem. Theory number 3, we have language. That one has fallen by the wayside because, Homo erectus had language, duh. We can learn from each other. Well, of course the Neanderthals were learning from each other, duh. And the Neanderthals may have been learning from us. Prisoners of war. And there were not armies attacking each other, please don't misunderstand. But and Neanderthals who come into the family, who marry into Homo sapiens, could have brought techniques, and Homo sapiens that married into Neanderthals could have brought Homo sapiens techniques. Groups that decided to cooperate and collaborate could have learned each other's techniques. It didn't have to be war. It might have been possible to share resources. We had a super long childhood. I talked about that. Could be an advantage. We can innovate and problem solve. It's hard to really push on this one unless there's more evidence than what we've currently got. Okay. We were more efficient with this division of labor and specialization of tasks. Now, this is a possibility because if somebody becomes a specialist, they can become an expert. They're not trying to be jack of all trades. They can get really, really good, and they spend their time thinking about, ways to have new tools and, and a more efficient hunting apparatus and more efficient carry bags and a more efficient this and a more efficient that, if you specialize, okay? We were just lucky has to remain as an option. And it may have been a combination of some of these other things, and we were lucky. Number 9 is the strongest candidate. It may have, because all these other things are, we're more innovative, we're more cool, we've got religion, we've got art, we've got these, it's all about this amazing brain, It might have been a simple case of when the available calories in the environment went from a big mammoth to a little bunny rabbit or a small, normal-sized deer, we could survive on 2,000 calories. They needed 4,000, right? Who's going to starve to death first? Them. And that fits with the archaeological evidence that most of the Neanderthals, the cause of death was starvation. So that's it for Anthro is Fun, class number 3, part 1.